Let's start with your activism in general. You are using your platform and your voice to actually speak out for progress. And I've you fighting on behalf of Black lives and liberation. Just tell us what makes you push outside of your acting to get so active.
Well, I think that's funny because that's kind of what's at the heart of this whole issue of what's going on right now, right? The supposed cancel culture that we're in, which I think is really just protest culture. And because if you think about it, the people who are supposedly being canceled are usually part of a very powerful white oriented establishment that really just want everyone else to shut up. Most of the people are not actually being canceled. And, I grew up born in the 60s and I grew up in the 70s in a very politically active family, but at a time in America where you came home, as a little kid and Nixon was on TV every day, facing, enormous pressure to resign or to even go to jail. You had the Vietnam War. The world was very political and it was in your face political. So, that's the culture in which I came up. So to me, there's no distinction between being a performing artist or a semi-public person, and having political values and being honest and speaking out about those values. So even before this whole cancel culture thing, I always found it kind of disingenuous when they told actors to shut up and not talk. A lot of that was during the Reagan era when we had an actor as president of the United States. So to me, it's always been disingenuous. It's always been just a way of getting someone who's saying something you don't like to stop talking. And in the technology age, that's gotten more prevalent than ever.
Yeah. Let's real quick on the technology end, right? Because, the entire conversation about Spotify, while I lean into it because of the royalties and the ownership, there's the technology component where this algorithm that we're fighting against actually prioritizes. And I can tell you that from my space, this space that we occupy, the algorithm is far more likely to take someone down the rabbit hole of right-wing extremism. Talk about it from that, from the technology perspective.
Sure. I think there's something really interesting there. I mean, there is an algorithm. I think the danger of referring to these as algorithmic issues is that they kind of detach the human element from them a little bit. Good. And the reality is that we're living in a kind of a cultural flashpoint, right? Where you have a lot of people who are anti-science, who are anti-democracy, very, sort of empowered white supremacist discourse. And at the same time, you have places for them to go where they can connect with like-minded people, which is the internet, where for the first time, there are communities of 100, 200, 300, a billion people online at the same time, connecting with voices that appear to be like-minded to them. A lot of those people are grifters who are just taking their money and telling them what they want to hear, as we well know. But the reality of it is yes, there's an algorithmic aspect in the sense that it will drive you towards more content that is of that type. However, it's not just algorithmic in the sense that these technology platforms are incentivized to have these kind of voices on their platform because it makes them more money, right? And there's no algorithm there. That's just pure greed, right? That's just human nature. If you say something incredibly divisive, if it bleeds, it leads, right? If it's really provocative and divisive and will whip up some group of people that will come rushing back to you for more, like a dopamine hit, that's just money for you. And there's no tech platform out there that's incentivized to say, gee, maybe we should suppress or turn the volume down on those folks because they have to face their boards and tell them why their profits are going through the roof. And no board is going to tell them to start driving those profits into the toilet. So that's kind of the problem I think that we're at with technology.
And so, Alex, one of the things that you said is, the time frame at which you grew up in, and I was born in '62. So when I hear, this whole free speech thing, it reminds me of the fact that there were signs that said white only. That's free speech. So should those 4 freshmen from North Carolina A&T have not gone in there and spoken up via their actions of sit-ins? Should the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, when 250,000 people showed up to say, hey, we don't like what you're saying about employment. We don't like what you're saying about housing. We don't like what you're saying about public accommodations. So, under this guise, free speech has always been a part, especially from our perspective. Should we have not said anything during the time when we were locked into chattel slavery? So now are they now saying, those folks who are pushing the free speech agenda, should I sit there and say it's okay for you to take my talents and pay Joe Rogan $100 million a year, sit there and listen to him call me the N-word? Should I just be quiet and say that's okay?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that the whole idea, there's a lot of terms that are being used disingenuously right now.
Yes.
I think, cancel culture is one of them. Free speech, the use of free speech is one of them. I don't view as what's going on Spotify and a lot of these tech issues as free speech issues, right? Because the fact is that, if Neil Young or Joni Mitchell or anybody wants to come out and protest something that is existing on basically a company, right? Not a government, but an actual tech platform. That's their right to protest, and their ability to say, look, we don't agree with what we consider to be racist or hate speech or dangerous, anti-vax rhetoric.
Right.
We don't see that as in line with our values. We are going to protest that by removing ourselves from your company.
Yes.
By the same token, Spotify is just a company. They're not the government, and and Spotify's paid an enormous amount of money for someone to be on their platform. And that person is drawing an enormous amount of ears to that company. I think the question with Spotify is less the question of free speech and more a question of terms of service, because they're just a corporation and they have terms of service. So if what's going on there is dangerous and violates their terms of service, they should do something about it, and that's a different issue. But I'm also, I'm always very cautious of when free speech gets sort of dragged out and people are saying, well, we have the right to say X, because again, I think it's just a matter of trying to silence protests. It's trying to silence, then we suddenly, the whole civil rights movement, which is becoming an issue that we're having to fight all over again right now. Women's rights, right? They rely on free speech in order to actually be effective and make change.
Because Alex, in this case, as I'm listening to you, and I certainly appreciate the profound description that you're providing to us. So I don't see a difference, historically speaking, from Spotify and Woolworth. Woolworth had the right to serve who they wanted to. In this case, they want to serve only white folks. Spotify has the right to, I guess, do what they want to do, and that is to pay a man. When you talk about these other artists, let's put in India Arie. She also, so Spotify is saying, well, Joe Rogan has the right to insult artists like India Arie, black folk, by using one of the most explosive terms. Woolworth has the right to say, no, we don't want you to sit here. We'll take your money, but we don't want to give you that kind of service. Right. So I don't see the difference there. And I certainly appreciate the insight that you bring to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
DJ Exclusive, did you know that Bill S. Preston Esquire was this righteous?